Hello, welcome back uh, to the Agent Hub technical series. Today, I'm diving into one of the most important architectural decisions in this framework. How do I design? How do I support multiple LLM provider without coupling my code to a specific provider APIs? This abstraction layer is what allows you to switch from OpenAI to Anthropic with a configuration change instead of a code write. So I'm going to cover why provider abstraction matters, the base LLM provider interface, concrete implementation, the provider registry, and the dynamic provider selection, adding new providers. Let's start with the problem. Every LLM has a different API. For example, if you want to, if the way Anthropic works is different from Azure, different from Google, different from. But on top of that, since I'm using a launching that make it easy for us to have the similar implementation pattern, I still see it as a good approach in order to separate a different provider. In case I don't want to use like a launching, I want to try to implement a provider specific functionality. This separation of a concern give me that flexibility. So like OpenAI uses a message array, Anthropic using different structure. Google has another approach. They all do streaming differently, function calling differently. Function calling differs across a provider, but thanks to launching that make this easy for us to have like a common interface. But even though we are a launching provider, a common interface where we'll be able to manage the provider in the similar way, but at the same time, I think it is still a good approach to have a different implementation for different provider. In case we want to do some specific implementation, you'll be able to have a full control and to implement a provider specific logic. So, and here is my solution. I have like a base LLM. If you look at here, I have a base LLM here, which has some abstract function, generate stream, generate with tools, and of course, I get model info in order for me to get the information about that provider. If you look at this model info, it's different in most of this provider. So which means that it is specific to the provider. So let's go through the OpenAI implementation like one of the provider, right? Because if you look at the constructor here, I initialize the OpenAI, right? So using the configuration from my settings. So, and I think you could look at the base provider here, this LLM provider here. No, the base provider is this is Registry. Let me try to open it here. Base provider. I'm gonna search for it in the code. Yeah, base provider. from LLM provider, I imported this provider. Let me search for it here. Look at the base provider here. And I'm going to change this because this import is not really good here. I'm supposed to move it up. I still have to do some cleanup. So I try to get the LLM config. So based on the name of the provider, I'm going to get the config, right? If you come to like OpenAI here, because I supply the name here. So based on this name, I get the config that this LLM actually need. So, and here I have a function. If you come to base provider, validate provider, which means that individual provider, I need to validate, do specific validation that is specific to each of the provider, right? So, and here I'm actually returning the provider's name. Here, this is initialized, right? If you look at the base provider here, I initialize client. So if you check here, this is a concrete implementation for the OpenAI provider. And I also try to implement generate. So if you look at it, I implement the generate. The generate method takes my standard parameter and convert them to OpenAI format. If you look at it here, I'm using a langchain, which make it easy and make this code to be more efficient and neat. Notice how I've adapting from my interface to OpenAI specific. This is the interface, and this is specific to OpenAI. And if you look at here, even all these are specific to OpenAI, and the capability also is specific to this because the capability of one provider may be different from another provider. So this is why we need to have a different concrete implementation. And if you look at the streaming tool, this is also similar, stream generation. And the code is small because a Langchain already provided some API for us to be able to manage them efficiently. So, and if you look at function calling is where the provider really differ. But thanks to Langchain again, because everything is streamlined, but at the same time, looking at here, how do I register my provider? If you look at here, I have a way to register the provider here, where I try to register the provider so that such provider, I'll be able to get this provider through a single interface. So in summary, for this provider, the key insight here is all the OpenAI specific code lives in this one class. Same with Anthropic, same with Azure, same with Google. So the rest of the system only knows about this base interface, right? The rest of the system only know about this base interface, and this is how it works. Now, let's go to the provider registry. So the question is, how does the system know which providers are available? And that is where the decorator-based registry comes in. If you look at here, I have this LLM registry, and I have this register. If you check this file, app LLM base, LLM, you see the LLM registry here. This is a registry pattern that I use to see that we have a function to register the LLM. This is to ensure that providers are imported. And every provider use this pattern. For example, every provider use this pattern. For example, if you go to this to register, I pass the name of the provider. Open the Azure at register, I pass the name of the provider. So this is a similar pattern that I use in all the implementation. So the registry method is a decorator factory. So if you look at here, this, let me open this. Looking at here, if you can check the code as well. So looking at here, the registry method is a decorated factory. As I was saying earlier, it received the provider name and returned the decorators that had the class to the registry. But here is the clever part, auto detection. If you come to this, look at the providers init file. This is where I have auto detection, so that automatically here where we have auto detection. So when the Python import the provider package, this imports all the provider modules. So the decorator executed during the import, registering each provider automatically. So this is not going to be available except during import. That is when I provide this auto import. This means adding a new provider requires zero change to the registry. So you don't have to change the registry. All you need to do is, if you need to add a new provider, you don't need to change the registry. All you need to do is just if you look at the auto detection happens in the init file here. So this is how it works. Application start and imports LLM factory. The factories call this, and this import all the LLMs modules provider. So the init imports all provider modules. Each provider class has this pattern where I say register decorator. So the decorator executes during the import. So this now registering each provider. So registry is now populated and ready to use. So all provider use the same pattern. If you look at them, look at it there. So like looking at this registration system, which is it allows the factory to instantiate provider without explicit registration. So we don't have to do explicit registration. Now let's talk about the factory patterns. So this look at it. This is the factory pattern. So if I provide this the factory create a provider instance, right? If you look at it here, and in order for you to get also the factory asks a method called get LLM. So it first check if the LLM, if the provider is registered, right here. Everything is in the code. If you check if the LLM is registered, if you come here, look at it here, LLM factory. This is it. I add additional method, get LLM by name, check if LLM is registered. So if the LLM is if not registered, then you try to raise a value error because such LLM could not be get. I also added get by name if we come to LLM factory, so that I could get by just passing the name of the provider. So, and if you need to like get a particular provider, if you check where I use it in the code, it's a LLM factory. This is how it converts string to num and validate. So I get by name, right? This will return the LLM provider. So it means if I want to use OpenAI, so I could just try to get it by name and look at the sample usage here. For example, I say get LLM. it means I want to use OpenAI. If it's Azure, I can say get LLM Azure, right? If it is Google, if it is Groq, if it is HuggingFace, if it is Ollama, or the same thing you could get and just invoke. So you'll be able to see a real implementation as you read through the code, and of course the application you could just run it. Now the question is, how can you add a new provider? Let's walk through adding support for a new provider. There are three steps. There are three steps. You create a class, you implement the provider class. You just need to implement the four abstract methods. So you register the provider, add the enums, value, and call registry. So add configuration, just a YAML file. For example, if I need to add a provider, all I need to do is this. Define a class. For example, I say Cohere provider. You need to implement the factory, the abstract method, just like we have it in the other provider. Just follow through. And of course, you LLM provider has this. I'm gonna show you this file. If you come here, I'm gonna try to see LLM provider just to show you guys what everything is available in the project. If you look at this constant, it means we need to define a new constant here, right? For example, here we have this. So, and in the configuration, in the YAML file, which I've explained before, you could define the provider configuration there. That is it. The provider is not available in the system. So that is the LLM abstraction layer. It is what makes this framework provider agnostic. And the next video, I look at a connection management system, how I apply similar patterns to external service integration. See you then.